Hello lovely people, welcome to another book chat episode, the regular but not monthly roundup of what I've been reading recently.
Sophie Vlogs.
I'm going to begin with two books which are on my 10 books I definitely want to read in 2018 list. First up we have Uprooted by Naomi Novak. I really liked this. So the basic setup of this that I knew going into it was that our main character, Agnieszka, lives in a village, and every 10 years the dragon, who is actually like a wizard guy who lives in a tower nearby, comes down, picks a girl, takes her off. She's his like servant for 10 years and then she's free, that sort of thing. Agnieszka is convinced that her best friend Kezia is going to be chosen, but on the day of choosing, when it arrives, it is Agnieszka herself who is taken. So that's like very, obviously fairy tale inspired, that sort of thing. I really enjoyed this book. This book starts off with that as its plot line, and then it reaches a point, and then the plot changes focus. And I got most into it when the plot changed focus. I didn't mind the bit when she was being like servant in tower type situation and that whole thing, but when I started to get really into this was when the plot focused on an event that happens with Kezia and then the repercussions, etc., that fall out from that, because I felt like it then became like a much more interesting, very like grim fairy tale insofar as the dark element to it, that sort of thing. I also really enjoyed when the focus was on the relationship between the two friends. I didn't hugely care for her relationship with the dragon. I was fine. It was just not something that I was massively like emotionally invested in. Whereas her and her best friend, I was like, yes, friendship. The second book that was on my list is The Gap of Time by Jeanette, which is a retelling of Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale. Again, I enjoyed this. I studied The Winter's Tale, which is why I was interested to read this. Winter's Tale is not one of my favourite Shakespeare. It's not one that I read and I'm like, oh, I love this play so much. So I think I had a similar approach to this book as I did to the actual play, wherein it is interesting. There is lots to talk about and draw out of this, but at the same time, it's not my favourite thing in the whole world. Third book is one of mine, and then after that we're going on to a run of books which were lent to me, but this book relates to one of the books that was lent to me insofar as the reading experience was similar if the plot is not similar at all. What I am talking about is, I read The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. I didn't know anything about this. I even said in my haul, I think they're making this into a film soon. That happened in like 2016 or something, and I just didn't realise, because I'm a fool. I thought that this was like a supernatural kind of book, because, Girl with All the Gifts, it makes it sound like she's got some sort of like powers or something. This isn't a spoiler, but turns out it's a zombie book, and if there's one thing you should know about me, it's that although, despite not consuming that much zombie-related stuff, I have zombie stress dreams. So, like, this was an interesting reading experience when you take that as your start point. This starts off, and our main character, Melanie, is a child who is kept in a cell all day, and then they're wheeled out, strapped down on chairs, and taken to this classroom, and they're taught things. And as the book starts to go on, you very quickly understand that they are somehow zombie children, although not full zombies. So in this world, it's sort of like a post-apocalyptic situation whereby a zombie outbreak has happened. Large amount of the population are hungries, which are like full-on zombies. These children are zombies, but they also still have their cognitive abilities. So they're in this sort of like research lab place. Then like events happen, plot ensues. They obviously end up outside of the lab place and stuff happens. At its core, this is really a book that looks at the relationship between Melanie and this teacher who she loves. I'm going to call her Helen because Miss Justino sounds a bit formal for me. So it's sort of looking at this relationship between them, and Melanie almost idolizes Helen, and then Helen is sort of in many ways making up for things she's done in her past and that sort of thing. So that was an interesting relationship to read about as this book goes on. I also found the nature of the zombies to be both horrible and effective. Instead of like a virus or something, it's like a fungal infection. Like there's ants in our actual life who get like taken over by this fungal infection, and then it controls their moving, and it makes, like, I'm talking about it and it's making my skin crawl. So that was very effective. All of that. So yeah, the nature of zombie in this was one that I've not encountered before, but one that makes me physically feel horrible. So that's fine. I will also say, without going into spoilers, that the ending of this was quite powerful and impactful. I finished it and I was like, okay then. So yeah, this was like objectively probably a really good zombie book, but I could only give it 3 out of 5 stars because zombies do not do good things to me. The book that it related to, insofar as the reading experience was similar, is Eleanor Oliphant Is Completely Fine, because that's another one of these books where I'm like, objectively, this is a very well written book. The setup of Eleanor Oliphant Is Completely Fine is that Eleanor is our narrator, and she's going on about how she's totally fine, and then you're reading it and you are like, you are not okay. You have been through some traumas. You might be coping the best you can, but maybe there should be someone helping you. That sort of a thing. So it's very much concerned with like mental health and coping with trauma and stuff like that. So Eleanor becomes friends with this guy called Raymond who she works with, and through that friendship it means she sort of starts to take a look at her life differently and reassess. So yeah, that's like the basic plot setup. The voice of this book was so realised, like that was such a unique voice and tone that it was very immersive. Like you couldn't question where you were. Like Eleanor's voice is super duper clear. Again though, was it enjoyable, or was I stressed out the whole time I was reading it? I think I was pretty much stressed out the whole time I was reading it, because I kept waiting for the things that were going to go wrong, and all these stuff. So, like, objectively, very, very good book. But, like, I wouldn't reread it, because I would be too stressed. I will also say, there's also a whole climactic reveal present in this book, which I don't know if needed to be there. If you've read it, you'll sort of know the twist that I am talking about. I feel like it sort of wasn't necessary because I felt like points had already been made that they didn't need to be quite so obviously done. That's cryptic, I'm sorry. If you've read it, let me know if you have any idea what I'm talking about or if you'd like me to clarify. After that we have All That She Can See by Carey Hope Fletcher. I bought this for my mum for her birthday and she lent it to me. This is the first Carey Hope Fletcher fiction book I've read. I read All I Know Now, which was like her advice book. This was an interesting reading experience. I'm not entirely satisfied by it, but I did enjoy it. I will explain. This focuses on Cherry. Cherry can see, she calls them medlums, she can see the bad emotions of people. So like if you are someone who suffers with anxiety, she would be able to see this little monster that is your anxiety, that sort of thing. And Cherry uses baking. She bakes good things and good feelings into baked goods, and she opens little bakeries around the place and she feeds them to people and she helps them build themselves back up and stuff like that. When I gave this to my mum, I said it reminded me a lot of stuff like Men of Van Prague, that sort of thing. And the first part of this book very much is like that, and I really enjoyed it. There's sort of a rivalry with someone else who has a similar gift to her, and that sort of thing, and I was like, okay, I'm not surprised by any of this, but I'm enjoying this. And then, partway through, there is a huge new direction that sort of forms, which I don't object to on principle, and I did enjoy reading, but it does mean that I sort of feel a little bit like this is 2 books in one, if that makes any sense. So, like, if you picked this up and you were someone who likes, as the title, it says on the back here, reminded me so much of Cecilia Ahern, like, if you picked it up based on those things, I think you might find it quite jarring when the story changes, because it becomes almost like a little bit sci-fi, like a little bit like, I don't know, like we're fugitives and stuff like this. Like there's all these elements to it which I did enjoy reading about, but I don't know if it meshed completely well. I wonder if maybe there could have been 2 separate books of this. I don't really know. Finally, this is a book that I bought for my mum for Mother's Day and she lent it back to me. Can you tell I just buy my mum books that I want to read? This is That Inevitable Victorian Thing by E.K. Johnston. I absolutely loved A Thousand Nights by E.K. Johnston, and so when I saw she'd released this, I was like, let's do it. This book imagines a future whereby Queen Victoria names her eldest child her heir, aka Victoria, and then marries all of her children to people throughout the empire rather than throughout Europe. So this world is very joined up. The empire never fell, but it's much more multicultural. And essentially, there are a number of different threads running throughout this. One of them is like the crown princess going undercover so she can have a nice holiday. One of them is like a slightly poorer person who's been invited to the big fancy coming out ball thing, and all of this stuff. And essentially, it turned out to just be quite a sweet, fun little romance book with some interesting ideas buzzing around. This is a world which I think I'm going to have to ponder a bit more and consider and look at some of the choices she's made and what I think about them and that sort of thing. Okay, that is everything I wanted to talk about this week. Hopefully this has been vaguely concise, but it's probably been quite rambly because, hey, that's what you get with this channel. As per usual, if you've read any of these, please let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Or if you have any recommendations, always welcome. Until next time, I hope you have a very lovely week.